Okay, good morning, everyone. Almost there to the end of the week, almost to spring break. So, just one more theory class after this, and then you're home free for a little while. Let's take out the homework handout that you have for today. Maybe you have already gotten that out, but I would like to see if any of you have, as usual, any questions on that I might be able to help out with. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is a question. Is there any way that you could show part one after the modulation?
Yeah, you mean in terms of the analysis?
Yes.
Yes, I believe I could.
Thank you.
Let's see. Well, we got all these markers stacked up here, and I don't know if any of them work. Oh, that one looks good. All right. So you've got your pivot chord, and your pivot chord should be a fully diminished seventh chord. Should be a 7 something in one key. There should be a 7, another inversion in the new key. Okay? And we're going to the key of E minor. And before the end of the second measure, there is one more chord here, and that can be analyzed in E minor as a 5-4-3. So that's the last beat of measure 2. You see how there's a B natural that comes in there in the alto? That makes for a separate chord, because it's a different pitch. Then, you should be able to analyze the final 3 chords in E minor. This one, in this second to last measure, I have a 1-6, followed by a 7 diminished 6. And then the final measure, I just have an E minor triangle with 1. Okay? But it's the chord on beat 3 of measure 2 that's your pivot. And it's only beat 3. It's not beat 4, it's not beat 1 or 2. It's precisely on beat 3 because there's a fully diminished 7 sound. Okay, I can't wait till we get out of this and get to the So, I hope this addresses your question. Basically what you were asking. What's that?
I'm not doing it in that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we do the pivot chord?
Sure. Let's see here. I'm not going to put it out in all of the 4 voices, but you've got F sharp, A, C, and E flat, right on beat 3. Okay. That is spelled properly or correctly in the old key of G minor. So you can just take the notes for face value. You don't have to think of any pitches enharmonically. It looks like it's just a root position 7 diminished 7. So that's what I would put on the top of the pivot. Now, in order for it to make sense in the new key of E minor, I have to think to myself, what is T of E minor? And that would be D sharp. So, can I think of this as a D sharp, F sharp, A, C, fully diminished 7th chord? And I can. All I have to do is just think of this one enharmonically, that one pitch, as a D sharp. And then I've got, looks like D sharp would be in the soprano, F sharp would be still in the bass, A in the tenor, and C in the alto. So what inversion is that when it's spelled in terms of D sharp, F sharp, A, C? Anyway. 6/5 is first inversion, right? Because D sharp, F sharp is on the bottom, it's the third of the D sharp, F sharp, A, C chord. So first inversion. What that's saying is that a root position 7/7 in G minor sounds exactly like a first inversion 7/7. And all I had to do is just think of the soprano note E flat as a D sharp. All the other pitches remain the same, especially the F sharp on the bottom. But if D sharp is the new root, it changes the inversion of the chord. Because now the third of a D sharp, F sharp, A, C chord is on the bottom, so that puts it in first. Yes?
On part two, could you do the chord right after the modulation?
Yes. How about this? Can I go ahead and just, since we talked about this, can I play that top example on the keyboard? And then we'll move on to the other one. Huh, somebody removed the bench here. We put a double stack of chairs. Does she like to sit on two chairs? Is it better for the back? Okay. So we start in G minor. Here's the pivot. Now we're already in E minor. Again, it's E minor. Okay. All right, let's go to the part writing. My answers in my old workbook, it's 232, where it comes from. Okay. Now this is an interesting example to say the least. It starts in C major, but it does not end in C major by any means. Who knows, and that's okay if you say it out loud, who knows what key did it modulate to? E flat minor.
Oh, son of a gun. That's not good.
Oh.
This is not good.
Yeah, and the way I guess you figure that out is because there's lots of flats in the figured bass after the pivot chord, right? In fact, in the very last chord, isn't there a flat 5 over a flat? Which means you flat the third above the bass, which will make it a minor, and you flat the fifth above the bass. So that's E.
I got really confused about the possibility again. So I didn't take that flat 5 and the flat 3 as this is going to be a minor. I was just really confused again.
So the figured bass is kind of went for you a little bit?
Yeah, well, I hadn't seen it in a while, so I kind of forgot how it worked. I thought I figured it out by the end, but apparently I did not.
I thought the last part was a little.
Mobley mixed. Oh, yeah.
Jeez, man. Chill.
Honestly, I was like, oh, that's weird, but we're
It was like
learning.
the
You guys got the chord right after the pivot.
Yeah, because like I look at it and I'm like, okay, 1/6 has to come after the 7/3, but then I noticed that the next chord was 1/6, and it was
Yeah.
usually
Yeah, most of the time you're right. A 7 diminished 4/3 will go to a 1/6. But sometimes a 7/7 chord can go to a stronger dominant first. So it's actually the 7 diminished 4/3 on the bottom of the pivot is going to go to a 5/7 in inversion. And then it's going to go to a 1/6.
Oh,
So let me put the, you know, I've got conflicting here, let me use this. Let me put up the pivot and the chord after the pivot. Okay, so the pivot chord has an A flat in the bass with 4/2 and an F in the soprano. And then the very next chord also has A flat in the bass, but with a 4 flat 2. And we have in the soprano. And we know that this is the pivot chord because I gave you the pivot symbol right there. Okay. So, depending on where you're coming from with the inner voices, I have, let's see, I have the B flat, which is a second above the bass. I have the B flat of the chord in the tenor. And the fourth above the bass would give me a D, and I have that in the alto. So it looks like in the old key of C major, It looks like it's spelled correctly as a 7/7 in the old key of C major. It's B, D, F, A flat. That in the old key of C major is a 7 diminished 4/2. Correct. Now to get it to make sense in the new key of E flat minor, what is T in E flat minor? D. Okay, there is a D in the chord. So now we have to think of the chord as D, F, A flat, C flat. This, remember, is B natural. So if I can just think of it as C flat, and if you want, I don't know, there was probably not very much room there. But what I did for the parenthetic chord is I did this. I just respelled that one note as a C flat. And now I can see that in E flat minor, the pivot chord is in second improvement. Right? Because the fifth of the D, F, A flat, C flat is on the bottom. So that would make it 7 diminished 4/3. Right? Okay. Now, you are right to assume that you expect it to go to 1/6. But before it does that, it's going to go to a slightly stronger dominant. And reading the figure bass means a flat 2 above an A flat is going to be B flat. And by the way, how would I part write this? Isn't this the 7th of the chord? Yeah, and I didn't leave enough room here, but I'll put my accidental on there. And then a fourth above the bass is going to be still a D. This regular D in the alto. So now it looks like in the key of E flat minor, this is the root. B flat, D, F, A flat. Is that a 5/2? Good. Which then I think you said you're correct, it does go to 1/6. Minor 1/6. Yeah, do you see the G flat in the bass, the very next one? That's a hint that you're in E flat minor. And how many flats are in E flat? 6. That's right. Okay, yes.
Can we use the first chord as a chord number?
Okay, the first chord in the third measure. Let me, why don't I just keep on going here, finish out this measure, and then I'll be able to get into the next measure. This has a G flat in the bass, and then I left the E flat in the tenor. That's right, and I double the E flat here, gives me a 1/6. This is still B flat because it's in the same measure. Six flat, 5 flat. And bass note is A flat again. Okay. The soprano is an F. A flat 5 above this would give me the pitch, force me to write in E flat, which I've got one in the alto, so I just kept it right there. And then the flat, that refers to the third above the bass. So that's going to be a C flat. And how does this chord function in the key of E flat minor? Well, it looks like it's F, A flat, C flat, E flat. That gives us a diatonic 2, half diminished. The 2/7 chord, first conversion. Yes.
Can you go back to that one? Sorry, it's just that little,
Might as well. As long as I have enough time to teach you the things we need to teach before each. All right, so the bass is a natural, and you have 6 flat 5 and a natural now? Okay, and then the top is a F. So F takes care of the 6th above the bass. The flat 5 above the bass is still going to be E flat. And I've got one in the alto, so I'm just leaving it right there. No flat necessary if you leave it in the same voice and it's in the same measure, because I've already got the accidental there. And then finally, the natural above, that refers to the 3rd above the bass, so the C flat turns into a C natural. So with these two notes, A flat and C flat, raised to C natural and A natural, but these staying the same, that turns out to be a dominant 7th sound, F, A, C, E flat. And because of the accidentals, it doesn't naturally fit in E flat minor. But I can call it a 5, 6, 5 of something, right? Because it's a dominant 7th sound. And the root is F. So F is the dominant of what?
B flat.
B flat, and B flat is what? Roman numeral in E flat. So I call it a 5, 6, 5, 5. You want to do the next chord?
No, it's part 3.
Can we actually?
No, sorry, go ahead.
On the pivot chord of part 3, when I did the parenthetical like respelling of it,
Sure.
I had 2 inharmonic notes. I had 2 notes that I rewrote inharmonically. I was wondering if that was correct or not.
That could be.
Yeah.
You just, it's always going to be, you have to enharmonically respell one or some, but not every single.
Okay, because I had 2, but I'd never done 2 before, so I was kind of confused.
I have 2.
Okay.
I had to respell the D sharp as an E flat,
And then the F sharp is a G flat.
and the F sharp as a G flat.
Okay.
That's right. Stand.
Little octaves, yeah, so the little octaves if they move together.
Can I go to the piano and we've done half of this. Can I go ahead and play this passage here, this section 2? Starting in good old C major, and then somehow we end in 6 flats. Here's the pivot. And now, we're in E flat minor. Not really draw it real fast. But I think that's, again, it's fascinating to me that you can go from C major on the top of the circle of fifths, E flat minor exactly on the opposite pole of the circle of fifths, with just one enharmonic chord. Nope. They're called step. They're octaves, and yeah, they're not moving to different pitches, so you're tone. All right, I think I better collect this now since I've spent almost half the class on it, which I don't mind, but as long as I get to the initial stuff. Make sure your name is on it, and I'll come around and pick it up.
No, I was thinking of
Thank you. So as you guys are in your second half of your, a lot of you in your sophomore year, right? Is music getting a little more challenging? Well, like just anything you're learning in music, maybe some things might be getting easier because you're starting to understand a lot more, maybe. But some things certainly could be challenging. Music is a very vast and deep subject. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now, I throw all my notes away. Oh, good. Okay. take a look at, well, I'd like to finish enharmonic modulation today. Get done with the enharmonic possibilities of the fully diminished seventh chord, and then on Friday we can look at something called altered dominance, and those aren't too bad because I think I only spend one class period on those. Okay. Let me make some space here. Since a 7 diminished seventh chord can be spelled enharmonically 4 different ways, to function in 4 different keys, then by extension, so can a secondary 7/7 chord. So if, for instance, we can have something like this, and whatever keys it might be, that means we could also have something like this, and whatever keys it might be, that could be a possible pivot chord. It's kind of like when, I'm not even going to go down this road. Okay, so, the good news is, we will not have to write out all 4 of a secondary leading tone 7 chords enharmonic possibility. We'll never have to do that. But it is important to know that if you see a pivot chord like this with a secondary 7/7, that is a 7/7 of another chord, the secondary 7/7 is only going to be allowed in the top portion of the pivot and never in the bottom part of the pivot. So this would be legal, but something like this we will never use or see. Why will we not use or see that one? Because there's a secondary chord on the bottom of the pivot. And I don't like using secondary chords on the bottoms of pivots, because trying to merge into or shift into a new key by using a chord that really doesn't even fit naturally in the new key makes the modulation not so convincing to the ear, at least in my mind. Okay? So this I'm okay with, because usually you have several chords before this one that help establish the old key, and it doesn't sound so foreign. But when you try to shift and propel yourself into a new key using a chord that doesn't even fit in there, that's kind of hard for the ear to adjust to. Now, you go to another, you take theory at another school, at another institution in this country, and maybe the professor there will be fine with this. In fact, I think the author is okay with this. And the author gives you some really drawn out, really long Beethoven piano sonata example, I think, where there's a pivot chord that's secondary in the bottom key, the new key, maybe even in both keys, I don't remember. But I think that's a little bit of a stretch. Okay, so in order to get a little bit of practice and see an example that involves a secondary chord, I need us to go to, let's see, I think it's page 412 in your book. And I will do my best to show this on the screen. Page 412 in the book has a lot of good enharmonic modulation examples. They're short, but they're to the point, and I think they're very effective. So page 412. I've got to turn the TVs on too, it looks like. I want to look at the middle example here on the page, number 2. think we already looked at the top example on page 412. Oops. So I'm not really too concerned about that one anymore. I mean, it's a good example, but I'm not revealing anything about this. Okay, I'm going to go to the piano and play this. And I want you to listen closely to see if you can tell approximately where you hear a shift in key. The passage starts in C minor. It does not end in C minor. What key does it look like it ends in based on the final chord? E minor, right? There's an E minor triad at the end. Okay. So C minor to E minor. Let your ears do a little bit of the work here. Okay? Where might you say?
Is it the second chord in the second measure?
It's not, if you're very close, it's not the second chord in the second measure, it's just one after that. It's the first chord in measure 3. That's the pivot. And you notice that that chord is a fully diminished 7/7. It's F sharp, A, C, E flat. That's kind of a, well, since we're focusing on that kind of thing, that's kind of a hint. Okay? Now, put this on the board maybe. We said that the two keys involved are C minor going to E minor. So I know that my pivot chord would look something like this. I just have to find out what goes on the top and what goes on the bottom. Knowing that the pivot chord, the first chord in measure 3, is the pivot chord, and it's a fully diminished 7/7. All right, so first of all, F sharp, A, C, E flat. Could that function in the key, old key of C minor? Now let me think. What's T in C minor? B natural. Are there any notes in that F sharp, A, C, E flat that are B natural or could be enharmonically spelled as B natural? No. So it's not going to be your regular plain Jane 7/7 of some kind in C minor. But as it's spelled, and I would say that it's spelled correctly in the first key of C minor. As it's spelled, F sharp, A, C, E flat, could we call that a 7/7 of something in C minor? Yes. The root of that as it's spelled is F sharp. F sharp is the leading tone to what pitch? G. And G is what's the base or the root of what Roman numeral in this key. So there you go, see? Part of the pivot chord, the top part contains a secondary 7/7. Now, because I've gone through this example ahead of you, I've made sure that the bottom part of the pivot is not a secondary 7/7. It should be a diatonic 7/7, one that fits perfectly in the new key. So, what is T of E minor? D sharp. Is there a note in that pivot chord that is D sharp or could be enharmonically spelled as D sharp? Yes, which one? The E flat and the soprano. It almost seems like one that we went through, like almost a similar example. I don't remember earlier this class, weren't we dealing with an F sharp, A, C, E flat chord? Yeah, I think we were. And the E flat was in the soprano. So let's think of this as D sharp. So that means that's the only one I need to enharmonically respell. So now think of the chord at the beginning of measure 3 as D sharp, F sharp on the bottom, A, C. 7 diminished what inversion? That's how that chord fits and functions in the new key of E. You just have to be able to see that the E flat is enharmonic with D sharp, and it changes the whole chord's perspective and makes it fit in a different key. And if I were to, it's funny, there's a different chord at the very end of measure 3, on beat 3. If I were to analyze that chord right on beat 3 in E minor, I've still got the F sharp and the A holding across on the left hand, but then I've got B and D sharp. Doesn't that give me then in E minor one of these? And the rest I can analyze, could analyze in E minor. No problem. So, without the coverage in place, yeah, there's the pivot chord. A 7 diminished 7 of 5 in C minor is enharmonic with a 7 diminished 6 5 in E minor. And then there's a 5 4 3 at the very end of that third measure. Again, I think I'd like to play it one more time now that you see how it works and how you get from one key to the other. So, starting in C minor. Here's the pivot. Which way am I going to resolve it? Well, like this. In E minor. Does anyone have any questions about that? Part of me is hoping that the more examples we see, the more we continue to hit this topic, the more it's going to sink in, and the more I think, more experienced and the more adept you will be at starting to recognize a pivot chord as being spelled possibly, potentially 2 different ways, and resolving 2 different ways to go to another different key. It's a really, to me, it's a really nice, kind of icing on the cake, when it comes to modulation and music. It's a real nice way to modulate that. If you only took up to theory 2, like, I'm trying to think. Do we have a major here where you only have to take up to theory 2? Is that the industry? Yeah. Say again?
I thought industry we had to take one.
I thought industry had to take 2.
Yeah. I'd have to double check. I think they have to take 2, but anyways, can you imagine though if you only just took up to theory 2, you maybe might scratch the surface of modulation, or you might not at all, and you wouldn't even know any of this cool stuff. At least that's what. Okay, I'm going to move on to the last topic that we need to finish off enharmonic 7 diminished 7 chords. And this last topic is very practical because it applies directly to your last homework assignment on this topic, which is going to be for Friday. And let's see, how do I introduce this? Okay. Let's say, for instance, that you've got a 7 diminished 7 in root position in A major. And it is enharmonic with a 7 diminished 4/3 in another key. And you have to determine what the new key is. I don't know that we've ever approached the problem quite like this, with the enharmonic 7 diminished 7 chord. What would be a way or a method or a strategy that you could use or write out to figure out for certain what the new key is?
Figure out what the chord is in E major and then.
Yeah. First of all, what I would do is I would write the chord out as it is spelled in A major, definitely. Okay? So let's do that over here. And I know a 7 diminished 7 in A major is G sharp, B, D, and F. Now remember, when I started this topic, topic, those of you that were here, I tried to stress that the 7 diminished 7 chord is a symmetrical chord. That means it's all stacked notes of a minor third on top of each other. Okay? And it's, when you hear the sound, you can't tell immediately which note is the root unless you're looking at it notated or written. Okay? You can't tell whether it's in root position or inversion, that kind of thing. But I want to point out that because it's a symmetrical chord, the members of the chord are cyclical. They kind of rotate on a cycle. I'll see if I can show you what I mean. For instance, in this spelling, this is the root, this is the third, D is the fifth, and F is the seventh. But when we go through that procedure where we treat the next note as the root, and we spell it enharmonically in a different key, and then we do it again with this note serving as the root, and then this note serving as the root, what we're actually doing is we're actually moving the root, and we're rotating the members of the chord, so to speak. So for instance, if I consider the B as the root, then the B would be the root, the D would be the third, the F would be the fifth, and the G sharp, or whatever it's spelled as, would be the seventh. And then if I treat the D as the root, then the root moves here. That means the third would be on the top, the fifth of the chord would be on the bottom, and the seventh of the chord would be there. And finally, if I have the top note as the root, then the root would be here, the third of the chord would be on the bottom, the fifth would be in the middle, and the seventh would be in the middle. Okay. So the members above this chord, the root, third, fifth, and seventh, they're on a cycle, they're cyclical. You can actually rotate them around. Wherever the root is, then the next one up is the third, and so on and so forth. It just kind of rotates around. So this is going to help us. A 7 diminished 4/3 is in second inversion, correct? That means that the fifth of the chord has to be on the bottom in order for it to be in second inversion. That would mean that I'm looking at this one right here. Correct? The fifth is on the bottom. Well, in that case, I chose to use D as the root. Did I not? You see that? And so if D is the root, it's really going to be D, F, and this would be A flat and C flat, right? D, F, and I'm not moving the pitches, but I'm enharmonically respelling them so that I can get it to be spelled right in the key. You see how A flat is the fifth of this chord and it's on the bottom? Okay. You maybe don't even have to go quite this far. Once I figured out that I was looking at this rotation, D is the root. Well, if D is the root of a leading tone chord, that means it's T of the key. What key am I going to? Huh? Yeah, E flat. In fact, let me give you a little bit more information. That's the next chord. Now do you know which for sure E flat I'm going to? E flat major. We'll do another one of these, but I always sometimes wonder every time I teach this, do I lose a bunch of students here? I don't know. But it's one way to help figure out the missing piece of information. Because if you know, because this chord is symmetrical, if you know that its members are just on a rotational basis, it helps you figure out a lot of stuff. Okay, let's try one more. And then I think that'll be enough for today. Oh boy, this is going to be a good one. Okay, the first key in my modulation is A flat major. And the top part of my pivot chord is this. The bottom part of my pivot chord is this. I need to know what key am I modulating? Oh, and I'll put one of these in here as well. What key am I modulating? Now, once again, Don't let any freshman theory student see this, because it might freak them out. And like on a scholarship audition day, don't let any high school music students come in here and see this, because it might, I don't know, it might scare them away. But this is not impossible, right? We know how to do this. Let's go ahead and write out or spell the chord in the first key as it's given to us. Okay. In the key of A flat major, a 7 diminished 4/3 of 5. Looks like it's going to be a D, F, A flat, C flat chord. Okay, because the root of the 5 chord in A flat is E flat, and the leading tone to E flat is D natural. And I want to put it in second inversion on the staff. So, let me go over here where it doesn't do too much. There it will be. And boy, I don't know what's going on here. My whole board is falling apart. C flat and A flat. D, F, A flat, C flat. And the way this is spelled, I can list the members as the root is right here, the third is here, the fifth is here, and the seventh is there. What I need to find is a rotation such that the seventh of the chord is on the bottom. Is that not what third inversion means? The seventh of the chord is on the bottom. In order to get the seventh of the chord on the bottom without rearranging any of the notes, let's just do the rotation and move the root down here. Right? If I move the root down one, then I've got the root there, the third there, the fifth there, and the seventh there, correct? Okay. Now, that means the root of this chord is C flat. Okay, let's think about this. C flat is T in what key?
C minor.
Okay, well yeah, you're on the right track, but technically wouldn't it be T in like D double flat?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we can't, that's not a real key, right? So I think you're already enharmonically thinking about this pitch. Spell it as B natural, D, F, A flat, and there you see the seventh is on the bottom. Now it could make a little more sense. If the root of this chord is B natural, then we're going to the key of C. C is tonic, because B natural is T in C. And we know we're going to what? C major or minor? Minor. So that's my final answer. C minor. Yes?
Is it, could you explain going from like a logical setting, like you're gonna become
Yeah, okay. So here I have the root, second from the top, which means the top note would be the third, the fifth would be on the bottom, and the seventh is in the middle. If I move the root up again, then I would have root, third, fifth, seventh. If I move the root down here, then I have root, third, fifth, seventh. And then finally what I did, if I put the root right in there, then I have root, third, fifth, and that puts the seventh on the bottom. So in other words, I started with this arrangement. If I move the root up, that means the third is going to have to drop down here, and the fifth and the seventh goes there. Because it's just on a rotational basis. If I move the root down here, then I have a root position for root, third, fifth, seventh. Finally, if I move the root up to the final position, that's going to put the third there, the fifth there, and the seventh there, and that's the one I want. Because when the seventh is on the bottom, then I have 4/2 inversion. Is there anyone here that kind of gets what I'm saying, that could think of a different way or a better way to explain it? If you need help for the next assignment, send me an email or come see me between now and Friday. I'm gonna get you the, I'm gonna leave you right now with the final handout. So, this handout comes from another theory text, and there's a whole bunch of junk on this. Don't worry about it. All you have to do is exercise 8. It's just this little exercise at the top. That's it. Is anyone going to see, especially?
I can make that one.
Can you? All right, because he doesn't have a printer. So. All right, we'll see you Friday, if not before.